Evenings in Charleston enveloped the horizon in gentle gold and muted blue. The rooftops sparkled with string lights and the undercurrent of laughter. A jazz trio played subtly in the distance as waiters traversed between tables, bearing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I found myself near the roof's edge, drink in hand, gazing out at the harbor as the final rays vanished behind the Ravenel Bridge. This night was meant to be a commemoration, my wife's birthday. Today, Emily turns 38. We had weathered much together over 10 years, constructing, enduring, and surviving. I believed this moment would embody the essence of everything we had fought for, making it all worthwhile. Then she raised her glass. Her smile was rehearsed, flawless. She softly rapped the rim of her wine glass. The crowd fell silent. I merely wished to express gratitude to someone who stood by me, fostered hope in me, and prodded me when I contemplated surrender, she articulated, casting glances around the gathering. And then she looked at him, Tyler. Thank you for everything. The applause echoed before the bewilderment subsided. I remained silent, avoided any scene. I approached, reclaimed the small velvet box I'd given her moments ago, its engraved pendant unopened, and departed. At times, silence is more eloquent than deception. If this struck a chord with you as it did with me, leave a 1 in the comments. Let's converse. Like, comment, and subscribe for more tales that resonate deeply but offer healing solace. And here's something to consider. Share this with someone who might benefit from hearing it. You never know, they could be living their own tale mirroring this one. Joshua was a quiet man, the type who only spoke when his words held significance. He constructed dwellings, but beyond that, he created stability and structure. At 42, he was a renowned architect in Charleston, admired for restoring historic homes with the kind of patience many men lose in their 30s. A decade ago, when he encountered Emily, she was a vortex of energy, brilliant, attractive, and unusually dynamic, with an ambience around her that felt electrified. She was 28 at the time, already making strides in the turbulent field of social media strategy. Her allure was indisputable, her intellect keen. While Joshua found comfort in simplicity and straight lines, Emily flourished in vibrancy, movement, and excitement. They crossed paths at a charity event, both giving their time, him designing a temporary pavilion, she managing the campaign that garnered donations. The first moment she touched his arm during conversation, he felt a change. She embodied everything he wasn't, and for a while, this difference made them feel unbeatable. United, they believed they could overcome anything, and they came close. The first significant setback struck 5 years into their marriage, a failed business venture that brought them close to bankruptcy. Joshua had attempted to rescue a boutique company by pledging his personal assets as collateral. When the firm collapsed, they lost almost everything. Emily might have departed then, yet she stayed instead, shifting nearer, transferring her laptop to the kitchen, and developing a freelance venture on their dining table as he silently labored at 2 jobs to prevent the mortgage from crumbling upon them. It was a matter of survival, neither romantic nor glamorous, but it was theirs. Then arrived the miscarriage, their solitary pregnancy, lost just when they started thinking they deserved something favorable. This event transformed both of them differently. Emily immersed herself in work, pursuing clients and projects, scheduling trips to conferences with individuals who understood her lingo. Joshua mourned silently, engrossing himself in architectural designs and client consultations, attempting to uphold a structure that unexpectedly seemed too silent. The grief did not tear them apart in a loud, dramatic fashion. Instead, it reorganized the furnishings of their marriage. They ceased sharing meals at the same table. However, how was your day? Inquiries gradually transitioned into vague, one-word responses. Instead of a fight or door slam, there was a gradual separation. When Emily's business flourished, Joshua reveled in her success more than she did. He declined a senior partner position at a prestigious Charleston firm to avoid uprooting her expanding agency. He deemed it a balanced decision, her progress against his choice. He meticulously designed her office space with the same attention he gave to his elite clients, even basing her company's color scheme on the sunrise hues she admired from their porch. He didn't require accolades. He merely needed to feel they were jointly constructing something. However, without realization, their shared dreams silently morphed into two separate lives. He observed her frequent phone checks during meals. Her smiles dwindled, confined largely to Instagram stories. He rationalized it, excused it, but she felt the stress. He thought to himself, this meal holds significance for her. He ceased inquiring about her daily life, primarily because he doubted if she would respond. Emily had transformed into a person who belonged to the world, clients, followers, screens, and Joshua. He'd turned into a mere bystander, continuing to support, remaining faithful, still clinging to the belief that love required persistence even when one felt unnoticed. The marriage appeared harmonious from an external perspective, yet beneath its polished facade, like an aging historical building with decaying beams hidden beneath pristine paint, their relationship's foundation was eroding silently, inch by inch. Neither of them had the audacity, or perhaps the stamina, to admit the fractures. Joshua kept constructing. She kept fleeing. They failed to notice they were no longer heading in the same direction until one night, under twinkling string lights and clinking champagne glasses, she thanked another for helping her advance. And all of a sudden, everything Joshua had constructed seemed as fragile as sandcastles. The rooftop shimmered. It wasn't merely the soft lights strung on the rafters or the candlelight's gentle reflection in wine glasses that created the ambience. It was the polished elegance that everything seemed to emit. The setting boasted a panoramic view of Charleston's harbor, a secluded spot Emily had reserved several months prior. The air carried the gentle, early spring warmth that encouraged lingering and whispers. Jazz melodies drifted from a live trio in one corner, while waiters moved gracefully amidst the crowd, serving oysters and rosé as if they were dancers. Emily sparkled, her navy dress fitting her flawlessly as if it had been tailored by divine hands, her laughter light, rehearsed, and audible from afar. People admired her, and tonight she moved through them like royalty, graciously accepting compliments and mentally noting each gift. Joshua stood near the bar, sipping neat bourbon, watching her command the room. He smiled when she looked his way, but she remained oblivious. This wasn't the first time she ignored something. He wasn't angry, not just yet. Instead, he was observant. He'd arrived ahead of schedule, arranged the centerpieces, ensured the music volume was to her liking. He even requested the staff to keep her preferred champagne chilled and hidden for the perfect moment. He'd devoted hours designing her birthday gift, a silver pendant adorned with the coordinates of the cliffside location in Ireland where she had shared that he felt like home. He accompanied it with a handwritten note tucked inside a small envelope. In the letter, he wrote, "For every place we've visited and every place our dreams have yet to take us." When it was time for the toast, Emily delicately tapped her fork against her glass, drawing everyone's attention. The crowd fell silent as she advanced, her smile steady, her voice assured. "Firstly, I want to thank you all for being here," she expressed, maintaining eye contact with her friends, clients, family, and even the caterer. "I feel so cherished, so bolstered. This year has been transformative, and it wouldn't have been possible without someone who stayed by my side through every decision, every collapse, every triumph." She paused, and Joshua could feel a gentle, secretive smile curl at his lips' edge. He thought she was going to thank him. After everything they had gone through, the bankruptcy, the loss, the rebuilding, this was the moment they had returned to their starting point. "Tyler," she said, turning towards the back of the room. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You've encouraged me, safeguarded me, and made me stronger." The quiet was oppressive. Joshua remained still, unmoving. Those around him exchanged furtive glances, not overt ones, merely subtle, instinctual flickers. A cough echoed, the sound of a fork striking against a dish. Tyler, positioned at the rear wearing a tailored jacket, offered a self-conscious nod before lifting his glass with a knowing expression. Emily returned his grin, easy and radiant. Joshua experienced a sudden, unsettling tightness in his chest, neither pain nor anger, but rather a crumbling, not of vanity, not of dignity, something more primal, something fundamental. He gradually lowered his glass, wiped his palm on his trousers, and advanced towards her with calculated composure. She glanced at him momentarily as he neared, a fleeting expression of puzzlement crossing her face, replaced by a polite half-smile, as if she were taken aback that he was still present. He remained silent. From his jacket, he retrieved the small black box, revealing its contents for a brief instant before closing it, then keeping it in his hand a fraction longer, enough time for her eyes to expand slightly. He set it on the dessert table's edge, turned and exited without any dramatic gestures or loud noises. In soft shoe taps echoing on polished wood, he departed, silence trailing in his wake. Entering Charleston's damp night, the humidity enveloped him like an additional layer of skin. The bourbon weighed heavily in his stomach. He walked, descending stairs, past valets, through the cacophony of late-night diners giggling under twinkling lights. His car lay a block distant. He didn't hasten. Each step was purposeful, loaded. Upstairs, jazz swelled once more, laughter re-emerged, and the festivities persisted as if nothing had transpired. Yet something had. Something irrevocable, not healable with an apology or a call the following morning. He'd witnessed her gaze, the emptiness, the decision. In that instant, Joshua recognized he wasn't merely abandoning a gathering. He was forsaking the self he left behind for those who had moved on without him. 3 days passed, and Joshua booted up his laptop. He reassured himself it wasn't snooping. She had gone out with friends, a phrase that felt more like an excuse than social interaction. Her charger had run dry, prompting him to email a file to her tardy client. The file name was forgettable, brand launch _deck. As he navigated her cloud drive, a folder caught his attention. It wasn't the name that seemed suspicious. It was the timing just accessed 2 days ago. A seemingly innocuous folder within, labeled personal, piqued his interest. He hesitated, but his curiosity turned sinister. His mouse moved on its own. Inside, the first image he encountered was of Emily in a red dress, one he had never seen before, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower. The timestamp showed it was from 6 months ago. His heart raced. That didn't add up. During that specific week, he recollected with painful precision. She informed him she was attending a branding summit in New York, the same week he laid his father to rest. Prior to the funeral, she phoned, explaining her commitments prevented her from attending, assuring she'd honor her promise by lighting a candle in her hotel room. Tears filled her voice. He had trusted her words. As he scrutinized the folder on his lap, his heart rate escalated with each downward scroll. The folder brimmed with photos. Photographs of her and Tyler at cafes along sidewalks, strolling arm in arm by the Seine, glasses clinking against candlelight. Expense receipts for high-end hotels, dinners for two at Michelin-starred restaurants. A selfie from their shared lodgings, bathrobes in identical hues. Messages, "You make me feel like the woman I once was," she had penned. "I wish I'd met you first." Another text read, "He'll never grasp what this is. I'm tired of deceiving." Joshua shut his laptop and remained motionless. The stillness of the room resonated like a scream within him. For a spell, he couldn't stir, couldn't even close his eyes. A resonating sound echoed in his ears. A pulsing tension throbbed within his skull. The sensation preceded his comprehension. This wasn't mere infidelity. It wasn't a slip-up. It was premeditated, pure deliberation. She had skillfully woven an alternate existence. While he was delivering eulogies and clasping the hands of distant relatives, swollen-eyed and hollow-hearted, she was falling in love under the Parisian skyline with another man. He stumbled into the kitchen, clutching the edge of the counter as if it could prevent his collapse. All began to crumble, memories racing through him like a blazing film reel. The sudden lack of desire, the newfound need for privacy on her phone, the unanswered calls, the terse expressions of love she'd toss over her shoulder. It had all been there, neon signs flashing, and he had attributed it to stress, grief, the trying years. He believed love was perseverance. Thought devotion would sustain them. But he erred so grievously. Anger followed next, not immediately. Disbelief washed over him. He contemplated if the images were false, antiquated, or perhaps she was assisting a friend. However, the sequence of events proved too coincidental. The Paris vacation, business launch, emotional detachment all hinted at an undeniable fact. He no longer fitted into her plans. Not for some time, possibly not for long. Joshua slumped into their kitchen island's chair, once where he'd surprised her with anniversary cupcakes, where she'd sip coffee while reading pitches, seeking his advice. This same island where he sat alone after his father passed, awaiting her return from Paris, questioning the woman who overlooked his grief and promised to make amends as if it were an oversight. Now he knew she didn't forget. She left. She chose Tyler in every significant sense, and Joshua was merely the man she hadn't yet found a way to abandon. The knowledge struck him like a demolishing ball. Pressing his hands against his face, he released an inhuman-sounding wail, neither sob nor scream. It was sorrow, yet not for her, but for a self he thought was adequate. For the duo they once were, which he imagined still lingered. For the man who stretched himself beyond limits for a phantom. In that instant, under the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the clock bought during their honeymoon in Rome, Joshua recognized the truth. She didn't merely betray him, she opted for another path, one he was never meant to walk alongside. The message arrived 2 days later, a simple yet seemingly timid, "Hey, are you there? Can we talk?" Joshua gazed at the screen, his thumb hesitating over the reply button for a prolonged moment. Marcus, his friend since undergrad, the man who stood by him at his wedding, who assisted in painting the unused nursery. On those lengthy, sleepless nights following the miscarriage and after his father's demise, he confided in Marcus. If there was someone he believed wouldn't hide anything from him, it was Marcus. But the message arrived with the gravity of one who had previously breached a boundary. They arranged to meet at a small bar off King Street, the type of dimly lit establishment where truth often reveals itself as everyone is too exhausted to deceive. Marcus was already seated in a back booth when Joshua arrived, a glass of whiskey before him, untouched. When Joshua sat down, they remained silent for a minute. Marcus appeared worn out, with disheveled hair, dark circles under his eyes, and twitching fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Joshua said nothing. He wanted to observe how Marcus would initiate the lie, what kind of deception he'd opt for. "I saw them," Marcus murmured finally, barely above a whisper. "At the Indigo," he said, a few weeks before the party. Joshua showed no reaction. He just gazed, his facial expression uninterpretable. Marcus hesitated, his voice trembling. "I didn't observe any wrongdoing, but it wasn't casual." She held his hand over the table, smiling in a way that hadn't graced her face for years. In him, there was a victorious glint. Joshua momentarily closed his eyes, something inside him tightening behind his ribs. "I didn't know how to inform you," Marcus admitted, his voice quivering. "God, Josh, I didn't know how. I tried to convince myself that I had misunderstood, that it was a one-time occurrence. And then I told myself it wasn't my concern. But mostly, I was afraid." "You weren't concerned for me," Joshua murmured softly. "You were afraid of being the messenger, afraid of destroying what was left of my life." Marcus started to speak, then stopped. His silence spoke volumes. "And it gets worse," Joshua continued, leaning back slowly. "Do you recall Tyler?" "Yes, you should. He was one of my clients 4 years ago. The lake house in Hilton Head. The one we customized from the ground up. I manipulated things for him to acquire permits and design fees to stay within budget. Spent weekends traipsing that annoying plot with him. He regarded me as his architect sibling. It appears he took that a bit excessively." Marcus's eyes widened. "Jesus Christ." Joshua shook his head, emitting a bitter laugh. "This transcends personal matters, Marcus. This isn't merely about my wife. This is about a man I incorporated into my sphere, a man to whom I gave a future, who then exploited that bond to undermine mine. I apologize," Marcus repeated, softer now. "I should have warned you. You deserve that." "No," Joshua retorted, voice low and steady. "I deserved more than this entire situation." They stayed quiet for some time. The din of the bar faded into a remote hum, unimportant. Joshua took a sip from his drink, allowing the burn to seep into his throat, giving the fury a place to channel. He wasn't a violent man, never had been. But the urge to smash something, anything, was increasingly difficult to resist. Finally, he spoke up. "You know what's absurd?" he said. It's not just Emily, Tyler, or you. It's the whole facade. The belief that loyalty is reciprocated, that by keeping your commitments, those dear to us will do the same. However, life doesn't function this way. Loyalty isn't rewarded with points. Instead, one is left behind at a slower pace. Marcus seemed on the verge of speaking, offering solace, seeking forgiveness, but he remained silent. Perhaps he was aware of the truth. Perhaps now he grasped that friendships can shatter as easily as glass or split painfully slow like bone. Marcus didn't intend to deceive you, he stated, his voice rough. But you did, Joshua retorted, not accusingly, just frankly. By staying quiet, you opted for her deceit over my truth. Whether intentional or not, it doesn't alter the price that was paid. Marcus's hands quivered slightly as he emptied his glass. What comes next? Joshua rose, placing a 20 on the table. Now, he said, staring at the man who once shared everything with him but blood. Starting to construct something irreplaceable, Joshua exited the Charleston night in silence, the door softly closing behind him. He didn't experience lightness, but rather clarity, which sufficed at that moment. For Joshua understood then that trust couldn't be recaptured jointly. It was a form of currency, and he had squandered his share excessively. From now on, he decided to preserve it for his own use. The box nestled in the back of the hallway closet, hidden beneath winter coats and stacked old client blueprints yet to be archived, had remained untouched by Joshua for years. There was no need to open it as it contained receipts, contracts, spreadsheets, and initial notes from when he initiated his architecture firm. In this instant, Joshua retrieved the box with determination, a feeling stirred by confronting a long-held suspicion and moving towards truth. The folder he sought was tagged Family Transfers Q4. 2 years ago, Emily was initiating her business and was finding it difficult to secure a private investor or bank funding. One evening, she sat before him, her eyes bloodshot from stress, seeking help until she could stabilize her venture. She asked if he had any options, any way to assist her temporarily. He recalled her words verbatim with minimal alterations. "Josh, you frequently mention that your firm maintains a buffer. I'll repay it as soon as I secure my first 3 clients." Of course, he agreed. He transferred funds from his excess accounts, the reserve used for seasonal freelancers, to cover material costs when clients were late and unexpected licensing fees. He classified it as temporary partner investment, neglecting to document it fully because of his trust in her and his belief that her success would be their shared triumph. In his home office, Joshua found himself surrounded by aged ledgers and his laptop logged into their shared business platform. He started comparing dates. Money from his company was sent in December, followed by Emily's company website debut, a live brand reveal video, new professional photos, hiring of 2 assistants, and a full-page ad in a local business magazine, all within 3 weeks. It wasn't cheap. Initially, he assumed it was a coincidence or she used her savings. However, as he delved deeper into the details, it became clear. The launch was primarily financed from resources he had given without any strings attached. Not as a loan or investment, but simple support based on his faith in her. Then, in a hidden equity update document dated 6 months after the launch, he opened the PDF and felt the blood drain from his face. 2 names appeared in the ownership structure: Emily and Tyler, who wasn't a consultant or silent investor, but a co-founder. His jaw tightened as he scrutinized the document. A chill of fury surged within him, not fierce like fire or volcanoes, but frigid, icy. It wasn't an anger that drove him to destroy. It was one that compelled him to hide. He closed the laptop gradually, leaned back in his chair, and exhaled a long, measured breath. This wasn't mere infidelity or treachery. It was plundering. Systematic. Calculated. She had leveraged him for her rise, constructed her empire with his efforts, and bestowed half of it upon another man. He rose from his chair, made his way to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and sipped it cautiously. In his thoughts, he revisited every instance where she offered him half smiles and weary kisses in thanks. The night she claimed to be too occupied to chat, but expressed gratitude for her comprehension. Each time he heard, "I'll pay it back," It felt like rehearsed lines from a play he didn't realize he was auditioning for. She had constructed a life with another man using the fragments he offered. Every foundation, every initial client, every campaign, all supported by his silent sacrifices. Not once did she glance back. He entered their shared living room and surveyed the space. The cushions she selected, the hand-crafted shelves he assembled, the framed quote above the fireplace that read, "Begin where you are. Utilize what's available. Perform what can be done." He almost chuckled. He had started with trust. She utilized his resources. Now she was carrying out her actions with someone else. Joshua didn't crumble this time. He didn't yell, didn't smash the laptop or shatter the glass in his hand. Instead, he retrieved his phone and opened a notes app. He started writing. Not an email, not a message to her, but a plan, a strategy. This wasn't about retaliation anymore. Joshua sought restoration of his time, focus, energy, and finances. He was reclaiming himself from someone who treated him as a stepping stone rather than a partner. It became evident that her actions were not impulsive emotions, but well thought out, calculated moves. Tyler not only supplanted Joshua in the bedroom, but also in business and legacy. What hurt him the most wasn't merely her infidelity. It was that she carried out this betrayal using his resources, on his ground, under his watchful gaze, while soliciting more support from him. Joshua set down his glass, picked up his old company blueprint, and gazed at its motto, "Designed for Endurance." A smile graced his face for the first time in days. Now, he was no longer the man who was exploited. He was the man preparing to reconstruct from the ashes. This time, not a solitary brick would be given to anyone else. Joshua departed Charleston shortly after dawn, leaving without fanfare or a truck loaded with packed boxes. Only a duffel bag, his laptop, and the soft rumble of tires heading north on I-26. He didn't write a note, didn't inform Marcus, didn't respond to Emily's urgent text messages that arrived too late and too far. Charleston was no longer just a city. It had become a crypt filled with memories that no longer belonged to him. The structures he had designed, the restaurants they often visited, even the cobbled streets they walked together, every corner housed a specter. Tired of living amongst them, Joshua chose a secluded cabin outside Asheville, nestled in the hills, engulfed by nothing but trees, wind, and stillness. It was modest, with only one room, a wood-burning heater, a squeaky porch, yet it didn't require anything more. For the first time in years, his living space felt truly his, unborrowed, unshared, uncompromised. The initial nights were sleepless. Insomnia not originating from physical discomfort, but instead stemming from an overactive mind struggling to release tension accumulated over extended periods. Gradually, tranquility seeped into his very bones. He resumed his routine of lengthy, solitary jogs along twisting forest paths at daybreak, each breath forming mist in the crisp mountain air. With every step, the clamor within his mind subsided. The relentless thoughts, the fiery queries, the anger, all dissolved into the cadence of his feet striking the ground. Sometimes he'd keep going until his legs faltered, and he crumpled onto the damp grass, exhausted but with only breath, sweat, and a mysterious, comforting emptiness remaining. In the evenings, he began to pen down his thoughts, not in the organized manner of recording job site observations or client meetings, but in chaotic, sprawling handwriting that filled pages like a confession. He penned about the gathering, the toast, the pendant, the deception, the quiet that followed. He penned down reminiscences of past years, dinners prepared after tiring days, shared jokes, and an event they seldom addressed a miscarriage. This tragedy had left deep scars in them both, and they were at a loss on how to mend the broken pieces. He wrote about Emily's solitary tears in the bathroom and his own escape into work, thinking that maintaining composure equated to silence. It wasn't until then that he understood the weight of guilt he still harbored from those days. Guilt not due to the pain itself, but for believing that love meant feigning well-being. One evening, following hours of writing, he launched a blog anonymously. No name, no pictures, just a title, The Abandoned Man. He posted fragments of his narrative, some entries being mere paragraphs while others extended over pages. He made no attempt to poeticize, did not suppress his fury, and refrained from masking the shame. Yet, he did not portray himself as a victim. He straightforwardly shared his truth, honest yet imperfect, strikingly human. To his astonishment, people began reading it. Initially silently, with just a few comments. Then emails followed, then long messages from strangers, men, women, and even couples who saw their own sorrow in his words. They didn't ask him to rectify anything. They merely thanked him for voicing what they couldn't. His inbox transformed into an unusual sanctuary, a testament that while pain may seem isolating, it seldom is. 2 weeks into his stay in Asheville, he received a message from his sister, Layla. They hadn't spoken for over a year, not since the miscarriage incident when a sharp remark during a heated dispute drove them apart. She had said she didn't comprehend grief. She had said he was pushing everyone away. Both were partially right and wrong. The message was brief. If you're prepared to talk, I am too. He invited her over. She arrived on a Saturday, donning a hoodie that carried the same detergent scent their mother used while they were growing up. They embraced on the porch and hugged that conveyed more than any apology could. That evening, they sat on the cabin floor, consuming takeout and conversing for hours. When he revealed everything to her, she didn't exclaim in shock. She didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she merely looked at him and asked, "Haven't you spent your entire life constructing other people's dreams? What about yours?" This question struck hard and remained embedded in his chest for days. He resumed drawing again, not for clients or contracts, but for himself. He drew tree houses, minimalist hideaways, urban renovation projects with character and soul. Notebook after notebook was filled with ideas he never had the time to ponder back in Charleston. And with each sketch, the ember he believed was extinguished forever began to glow once more. He discovered a local cooperative of independent builders and creators who exchanged thoughts in a converted warehouse weekly. He concealed his identity from them. He didn't disclose his past in Charleston. He presented his sketches and remained silent. One day, someone commented, "The artist of these designs thinks in layers. This is a person who has transformed pain into purpose." That evening, he strolled home with an emotion he hadn't experienced in months' hope. Not the wishful sort that relies on others, but the resolute, earthbound kind born from acknowledging survival of the toughest ordeals and the understanding that everything following was rebuilding. He occasionally felt anger, found himself contemplating Emily, Tyler, Marcus, and recalling the rooftop incident. These thoughts no longer controlled him. They flowed past like weather, leaving him standing. It wasn't until weeks later that he eventually modified the About section on his blog. No name was attached. Just a single statement. "I'm not just the man left behind. I'm the man who kept moving forward." Somehow, this felt sufficient. For now, because he had unfinished business. Far from it. He ceased living to seek validation and started creating to achieve tranquility. Every drawing, every sentence, every advancement wasn't about seeking retribution or disproving others. It was about validating himself finally. One evening, an email arrived as Joshua sat on his cabin porch with a sketch pad in his lap and coffee growing cold beside him. It was from a design association he hadn't thought of in months, inviting him to be the closing keynote speaker at a national conference in Atlanta. The topic, architecture as storytelling. Initially, he considered declining. He had been shedding every aspect of his past identity for the past few months, reducing himself to the essential self beneath the roles. However, as he read further, something within him responded, not ambition, not vengeance, but timing. Perhaps purpose. He agreed. 3 weeks later, he entered a luxury hotel's ballroom, impeccably dressed yet bearing the quiet burden of the man he had evolved into. He skipped the green room. He avoided interacting with other presenters. Instead, he stayed hidden in the wings, observing the parade of polished speakers deliver smooth presentations on innovation, sustainability, and spatial efficiency. Their words were well practiced, their slides impeccable. Yet, as he hid behind the curtain, he felt no echo of it all, just an unyielding stillness that came from knowing he lacked a script. He possessed a story instead. When his name was called, polite applause reverberated softly, but it didn't amplify until after he stepped onto the stage. And that's when he spotted them. In the front row, Emily and Tyler, side by side. Her hair flawless, his demeanor smug. She hadn't anticipated his presence. That much was evident in her expression, eyes slightly too wide, a rigid smile concealing the fear beneath it. He approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and paused for a beat that seemed to elongate, making the room lean forward. Sometimes, he commenced, his voice serene, the people you construct the world for can destroy your very foundation. Pause. He offered a subtle, undramatic smile of resilience and carried on. I entered this field believing in the endurance of things, that if you established the foundation correctly, erected the framework, and ensured alignment, what you constructed would withstand the trials of time. I translated this principle to my work, my venture, my relationship, even my friendships. I held that steadfastness was a form of wealth, that as long as I kept constructing, those dear to me would remain. Yet, I discovered that sometimes what you're constructing isn't mutual. While you're laying bricks, someone else is secretly sketching blueprints for an exit. This revelation comes gradually and unexpectedly, only when the final wall is completed, and you realize the door no longer opens for you. The room fell silent. Every eye was fixed on him. Not even Tyler could suppress his smirk. This isn't a narrative of bitterness, Joshua clarified. It's about understanding. It's about seeing things as they truly are. Rebuilding is not about pursuing what was taken from you when someone else wields your resources, skills, and emotions. Instead, it's about constructing something wiser, more robust, even if it means doing so alone. The message resonated with a few, then more, eventually resulting in quiet, gradually escalating applause that echoed like thunder throughout the room. Joshua eschewed presentations and promotional pitches. He simply spoke honestly for 20 minutes, raw and unrepentant. He recounted loyalty without question, watching your efforts transformed into another's dominion, how one can confuse quietness with fortitude until suddenly you discover your voice, not as an expression of wrath, but as a means to survive. Upon completion of his speech, the room erupted in a standing ovation that trembled the chandeliers. Yet he did not wait for the applause to subside. Instead, he departed the stage, casually passing through the front row without sparing Emily or Tyler a glance. The consequences had already taken hold. Later, rumors would circulate about investors withdrawing from Tyler's ventures prior to noon and Emily losing a significant deal following her name appearing in forums linked to his blog the next day. He hadn't published anything himself or named names, but stories often emerge when the facts are self-evident. He skipped the post-event gathering and ignored the calls received later that night. Already in his car, he was leaving Charleston with the windows open, feeling the wind tug at his sleeves like liberty. He didn't feel victorious, he felt done. Closure doesn't always announce itself with pomp. Sometimes it's just the soft click of a door closing behind you and the sound of your own footsteps walking towards resolution. He didn't return to Charleston for closure or conflict. Neither was he seeking an apology that wouldn't be offered, nor explanations that would only reopen old wounds. Some tales don't necessitate a second act. They merely require an ending to pave the way for something fresh. And Joshua had already ventured into this new phase, not with pomp or wrath, but with tranquil determination. He didn't pursue vengeance, he didn't retaliate, he didn't destroy what remained. Instead, he released it. For it is often the true demonstration of strength to refrain from retaliating, rather than allowing those who shattered you to pen your next line. Instead of waiting for another to affirm his value, he started expressing gratitude towards himself. Gratitude for rising each morning when all he desired was to vanish. For running until his lungs ached instead of drowning in the burden of their actions. For writing when the quiet in his cabin echoed louder than any betrayal. For finding tranquility not in another's embrace or approval, but in the calm that followed sorrow. She had publicly thanked another man. Quietly, yet powerfully, Joshua started to thank himself for enduring. No longer was his dwelling a place filled with common belongings or personalized linens. It wasn't shaped by who shared his bed. Instead, it resided within him in his backbone, in his breath, in the consistency of his strides ahead. He constructed it piece by piece through forgiveness, solitude, and self-regard. Unlike the previous one, this sanctuary was unyielding because no one else possessed its design but him. The mornings in Asheville became warmer, the air thinner, and the runs longer. One Saturday, he returned to the coast, not to Charleston, but just beyond the city where the sky seemed broader and the world felt calm. At dawn, he parked near the Ravenel Bridge, tied his laces, stretched in the crisp morning, then ran. His feet struck the pavement with a gentle rhythm, his breath creating mist in the early light. At dawn, the sun coated everything with gold. The bridge cables, the crests of waves, and the faint silhouette of the cityscape in the distance. He didn't sprint hastily. Instead, he ran because his body had learned that motion was therapeutic. Progress didn't always have to be loud, it could be subtle. Halfway across the bridge, he paused, gazed over the harbor, hands on his hips, heart pounding rhythmically, and smiled. Not due to his pain disappearing, but because he was no longer afraid of it. Because what they took away had transformed into a seed, and from that seed, he evolved into someone resilient, someone unyielding, a reborn man, not from fire or retribution, but from understanding. And as he prepared to continue his run, his mind didn't wander to her or Tyler or the man he once was, but to the question that peacefully dwelled within him now. If it is only by losing everything you believe to be essential that you ultimately find your true self, was that loss truly a loss at all? Have you ever recognized yourself as an alternate choice in another person's narrative rather than the primary character or even a faithful sidekick? You were merely a placeholder, dependable, practical, easily discarded once something more alluring took its place. It could have been in a glance directed towards someone else, or in a dialogue where your name was never mentioned, or a moment when you suddenly recognized the insincerity hidden behind their rehearsed smile. Perhaps, like Joshua, it didn't strike you all at once. Perhaps it came gradually, painfully, over extended periods of time, through small signs, until one day you found yourself standing there, clutching your heart, and realizing that they had already discarded what you were holding on to. And when this realization struck, what did you do next? Did you cower? Did you plead for a role in a story no longer yours? Or did you stand tall, calmly resolute, and walk away from the scene? Occasionally, it's the strongest action to depart without causing a stir, to leave with self-respect intact and one's future in hand, to grasp that being supplanted isn't about being damaged, it's about being redirected. So let them express gratitude elsewhere. Let them alter history, embellish their departure, refine their narrative. You. You should thank yourself for maintaining compassion in a world intent on hardening you, for enduring what was intended to break you, for opting to rise without seeking acclaim. This isn't merely a tale of betrayal. It's a story about renewal, about reclamation, about recognizing that the most indestructible structure you'll ever construct is the one that originates from within you. Now, when your moment of change arrived, what did you fashion from the embers?